Now, we're back. Part 3 of my rushed lesson, because I'm going to be away having surgery. Measuring circuit energy. You have heard of a speedometer. Have you ever heard of a jouleometer? No, of course not. We can't measure the joules of a single electron. We don't measure the energy of a single crumb of a cookie, but the whole thing at once. We report the joules, or calories, of an entire cookie at a time. In electricity, we report the energy of an entire coulomb at a time. A 10-volt battery is giving 10 joules of energy to every coulomb that comes through. A 12-volt light bulb will absorb 12 joules of energy for every coulomb that comes across. Captain, I'm scanning an energy source I've never seen before. Mr. Spock, it has come to my attention that not once as a science officer on the Enterprise, not once have you recognized any energy signature that you have scanned. Captain, don't energy shame me. So, what a volt really expresses is the energy in each coulomb, just like we tell you the energy in each cookie. So, a 1 joule cookie, a 1 joule coulomb. This is a 100 joule cookie. This is a 100 joule coulomb. Don't art shame me. I did my best. Do you understand the difference? The difference is the 1 joule cookie is made up of millions of tiny fragments of flour and sugar. This joule is not in 1 electron, but in a gigantic gazillion of them. Unfortunately, we renamed the rates. So if I say to you 1 joule cookie per day, we turn the 1 joule coulomb per day to an amp. And we hide the rate. So keep it clear. The rate of energy in an electric circuit. Now it begins to make sense. A 10-volt circuit provides 10 joules per coulomb. So in a way, that's 10 volts is like saying 10 calories per cookie. It's giving you an energy level. See, look at the energy. It's zip, 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 zip. If I tell you there's 5 amps of flow, that means 5 cups of these 10 joule electrons are coming down every second. So 10 joules a coulomb with 5 coulombs a second means 50 joules a second, or 50 watts. So let's look at this again. Each cup of electrons has 10 joules. If 5 cups a second are coming down, and each of these cups has 10 joules per cup, you're getting 50 joules every second, or 50 watts. So if you can do this with cups, you switch it to coulombs, and you've got it. So imagine if I have 100 joules per cookie, and I eat 10 cookies a second. Then I'm eating 10 joules per cookie at a rate of 10 cookies per second, which means I'm eating 1,000 joules a second. Just think about it. Much easier to look at this graphic and understand that 10 cookies a second, and if there's 100 joules per cookie, that's 1,000 joules a second, which is 1,000 watts. If I have 10 volt electron bundles and 5 bundles or cups of electrons per second are coming down, then you've got 50 joules every second, which is 50 watts. Now, when you're watching your diet, do you want to calculate the energy flow or the total energy you consume? Right? Do you actually go, I'm on a diet, I have to eat less, or do you say, I'm on a diet, I have to eat less per hour? No, you do it in total. So typically you want the total energy you consume. In words, this could be expressed, my consumed energy equals the rate I eat the food multiplied over the time I consumed it. Or energy is power times time. We could have rearranged the formula, power is energy over time, the way a math teacher teaches it to you, but I'll do it a different way. Think about the common sense. If you are being paid $10 an hour and you work for 4 hours, what would you do with those two numbers to calculate a total? So if I say to you, you are using up 100 watts, which means 100 joules every second, and you run it for 10 seconds, what do you do with the two numbers? You multiply. So I eat 200 cookies a day for 10 days, or 1,000 joules of cookies a day for 10 days. If I decided that the cookies were 5 joules per cookie, like the previous example. This means I ate 1,000 joules a day times 10 days equals 10,000 joules of cookies. It's exactly like calculating your pay when you know the rate of your pay, except the time is in seconds. Now let's go to specifically for electricity. If I had a 100 watt light and it ran for 200 seconds, how much energy did it use? Now, the trick is that W. Get rid of it. The minute you see the W, change it to a joule per second, or a watt. And the minute you do that, the answer is obvious. Instead of saying, I have a 100 watt light and it ran for 200 seconds, how much energy did it use? And you go, I don't know. You go, 100 joules every second for 200 seconds. What if I said 100 cups of water every second for 200 seconds? How do you calculate the total? If you express watts as a rate, it is deadly obvious the correct thing to do. So this at the moment looks like, how's this going to give me the energy? You make the substitution. Oh, I get it. That's like saying if I make $100 an hour and I work for 200 hours. Gotcha. I multiply. There's your answer. And you will fight me on this, big time. And the second you do what I say, strike out the W and change it to joule a second and say it in your head, the answer, the steps you need to take become obvious. Now let's take a look at typical light power. We figured out we're about a 100 watt energy source. 100 joules a second is what we're consuming, and that's pouring out in heat in our body and flapping our lips and everything. So what is it in terms of light? Traditionally, the 60 watt light bulb was the most common wattage. This bulb uses 60 joules every single second. And if you have one of these bulbs here, and your skin is modestly tough, you will find that a 60 watt incandescent you can grab with your hands and it will become uncomfortably warm in a matter of a few seconds. A 100 watt light bulb is definitely grab it, burn your hands. So 60 watts of light was a standard desk light. It's not particularly bright, but in terms of heat, it's quite uncomfortable to touch. Now, the newer bulbs here, this 5 watt LED bulb is just as bright as the old 60 watt. Now, it's using 12 times less power than this one. 5 times 12 is 60. So this means this bulb uses 60 joules a second. This one uses 15 joules a second. This one uses 5 joules per second. The difference is each of these going down makes less heat. And I have a video online using my little FLIR infrared camera. You can see the bulbs lit up under infrared if you go looking in grade 10 under optics. Now, does this guarantee that if this bulb is using 60 joules a second and this one uses 5 joules a second, that this bulb guarantees to use more energy? And the answer is like this. How is it that a person making $5 an hour could earn more than a person making $60 an hour? So how is it possible a bulb that burns 60 joules every second might not use as much energy as the bulb using 5 joules a second? And if you can answer that, you really got a grasp of power versus energy. So, we'll move on to this in a moment because we're not alone anymore. So I'm going to pause the video here and deal with my children coming home.